see you guys in the dark.
So this happened well over a decade ago while I was at university. I'm not going to give out the place, but if you are from there, you probably know or have heard of this person. And when I get into the background of it, which is connected to a pretty awful story from my country. So to give some further background, binge drinking was a thing back when I was young. Not only that, I was a young woman, coming from a town that was well known for its women binge drinkers, and moving to a town that was well known for its hen parties for university. I didn't have the best examples of safe drinking, but it explains why in Freshers Week, on my second year of university 10 years ago, I was stumbling around some random streets of my university town, suddenly sobering up and realized that I had left the backstreet dive bar we always drank in, and got very lost on my way to the other bar or nightclub I was supposed to meet my boyfriend at, which was in a different part of town. So here I am. It is cold, windy. I'm ringing my boyfriend, but it's Freshers Week. He's a fresher. He's at a very loud and popular nightclub on its first week of university. There is no way that I'm getting through to him. I start looking around, trying to figure out where the hell I am. But I'm wasted. Like bad. It's worth noting at this point as well that although I am 19, people were shocked that I was not 15 or 16. I looked pretty young for my age, and I considered myself an artist at the time, so I dressed pretty oddly, which made me look even younger. Here I am, in the middle of the night, drunk in a dress, and of course I did not have a coat even though it was near winter, because that was not just done on a night out. I'm stumbling around, looking confused at my phone, and clearly lost. Suddenly, a taxi pulls up. They have a taxi light on the top of the car. The guy is waving me up. He asked me what's up, and well, I just started explaining my predicament. I figured that I can get into the taxi and just get to where I need to be. No more trying to figure out where the hell I am and trying to get across town in this state. I tell him the nightclub. I have the money. I start texting my boyfriend and telling him that I'll see him in about 10 minutes. He's still not even checked his phone though. I get into the taxi. It's pretty warm, and the taxis are safe, right? So I start feeling a little drunk again. Taxi guy tells me to get in the front though, which is pretty odd from where I'm from, but I'll be out in about 10 minutes. And this absolute ridiculous situation that I've gotten myself in will be over. So I get in the front. Fine, it's weird, but it's fine. I text my boyfriend and start getting comfy, trying to feel drunk again because otherwise my night is getting more and more expensive, and I'm a student. Taxi guy starts asking me a lot of questions. I don't really pay attention at first. He keeps asking questions, especially when you are clearly lost and very drunk, when they have picked you up. So I'm kind of zoning out, but then he asks me what year of school I'm in, which is just a wild question any way you think about it. Why would that matter to him? I laugh and explain that I go to university. Throw in there that I'm meeting my boyfriend because this guy is giving me weird vibes at this point. He assumes that I am a fresher, which is basically new to town. I don't bother to correct him, because why would I? I'm bouncing out of here soon, and this will be all over. I'm not new to town, and it's fairly small, though I do go to university with people all across the world. Some people just grew up down the road, so local gossip is just known, especially when it's crazy. I'm kind of on edge by this question. I've realized I don't like the way that he keeps looking at me, and that I still don't recognize where we are, even though I should know by now. The part of town that I should be heading towards is much closer to where I have been living the past year, so I have my phone in my hand, explaining that I'm going to try my boyfriend again so that he can meet me outside. He must have known that I was weirded out by him. He just must have, but he was so calm about it that he really didn't care. He starts bragging to me about some stuff, his money and businesses, then tells me about he owns a kebab shop. Well, he doesn't say that exactly. He tells me the name of the kebab shop that he owns, and my heart drops into my stomach. I have sobered up completely, and I am full of adrenaline by now. I know this shop, because a girl has gone missing, presumed dead, a school-aged girl to be exact. The last place that she was seen was that kebab shop. I'm also very suddenly realized that this taxi doesn't have a taxi meter. The story going around town is that schoolgirls would go to this kebab shop, exchange sexual favors for food, and sometimes drugs. Like, this isn't even really a debated part of the story. This is a poor area. These kids don't really have parents, not ones that are actually cared about their well-being. It's kind of unexpected for my country, I suppose. But this town was absolutely rife with this kind of thing. This is why the missing or dead girl was at his kebab shop that day. She was known to go to this shop and trade sexual favors for cocaine and for food. The next part is what is up for debate. This is the gossip part, but this is what people in town believe is the truth. It's worth noting that even now, in 2021, no one has been convicted for this girl's murder, and she is still technically missing as far as I know. This man I was in the car with, a car I now know is definitely not a taxi. He was accused of killing this girl, and the reason that she was never found? He ground her up and sold it as a kebab. Insane, I know. But at the very least, I knew 3 things were true. She was missing. She was known to sell herself to this man for food. He was the last person that she has been seen with, and at the very least, has made jokes to various people in town that he had turned her into meat and sold her. And I was in the car with him, not a taxi man. After he said the name of the shop, everything moved so quickly, but also not at the same time. My phone went through to my boyfriend's voicemail, when I did start calling him at least, and I suddenly decided the best thing to do was pretend that he answered. I left my boyfriend a voicemail of over 15 minutes. God knows what I even said. We never did listen to it afterwards. The taxi guy, no, the kebab shop guy, was babbling about some shit while I was leaving this absurdly long voicemail. I was talking repeatedly about how I would see my boyfriend soon. We can't be that far away. I just hoped that this would make him drop me off. I started thinking about how I was going to break the window, doors were locked, and how I hoped that I wouldn't be made to pay for it if I did. But then I suddenly started to recognize where we were. We were going the wrong way, but we were right near the nightclub. Oh my God. He slowed down, and I got out. We didn't say anything. He didn't ask me to pay him. I guess that I'd given up on pretending to be a taxi at that point. I shut the door, and he drove off. As soon as I was on the pavement outside of the nightclub, I was so relieved. I'd never been so happy to see it. But the next thing that I knew, someone was grabbing me and pulling me over to a car, and I absolutely crapped myself. Thank fuck it was the police. Though he was pretty pissed off with me, having to go with me for getting into the car at first. Like asking me what the fuck I was thinking, things like that. I explained that the kebab shop guy told me that he was a taxi, and that's how I learned to check for taxi licenses, because this very grumpy police officer told me to do so. Basically what happened was that, because of the fact the police had nothing on this guy, and as far as I understand, they brought him to court, and there was not enough evidence. They had taken to following him when they came across him at night, just in case they caught him doing something. And that's probably what stopped me from being turned into kebab, or likely being raped that night. The police following kebab guy freaked him out enough that he took me where I asked to go, and ran off before he could get into trouble. I gave the police a terrible statement between tears because my bloodstream was just alcohol and adrenaline at this point. They got annoyed with me and handed me back to my boyfriend, who had finally checked his phone and decided to come outside. I then explained to my friends the absolute insanity of what had just happened to me, while smoking a lot of cigarettes in the smoking area. This is kind of a fun story I tell on dates now, but at the time, it was actually this mundane insanity, calm terror. Not a good freshers' night out overall. When I first started dating my now husband a few years ago, we would meet up after he finished work, and he would bring his bike and lock it up as he lived a few miles away from me and the next town where I lived, which is where he worked. He biked a few miles a day. We'd also meet up with friends sometimes. After we would walk to his bike, and then he would walk me to a taxi. I would wave goodbye as it's driving off. I lived a few miles from the nearest town myself. My husband lived a few more miles out. He would then go bike home. I never once thought to check if the taxi man had an ID or a face that matched the picture, to check the company actually exists. I just trusted that it was the real thing. I do constantly check these things now, and ring up to make sure that the person actually works there. Sounds paranoid, but here is why. I got on the taxi just like every other time. The taxi driver seemed quiet, but I just assumed that he was either tired from being on a long shift or just a bit shy. Being a bit shy myself, I thought that I understood. I did the usual and told him where I lived. To get to my parents' house, I lived at this point. You have to go down a long road and a street about a mile long. Then you have 2 turnings. If you miss one, it doesn't matter. You just drive up a bit more and you get to the second turning. The taxi man missed the first turning. I thought he must have daydreamed while driving, or just didn't know the area very well. Back then I did a lot of giving people the benefit of the doubt, and overly naive and nice. I told him, but he kept on driving. Fear did kick in, and I actually shouted, "You're going to miss the second turn, too," as he was still driving. He wasn't saying a word at this point. I remember grabbing my phone to ring the police, and he slammed the brakes on, causing my phone to slip out of my hand and land on the floor near my feet. He reversed backwards without checking if any other car was behind us, and was about to go down the second turning. I quickly said, "Here is fine," as I had a bad feeling, and didn't want him to know where I was living. He finally spoke and said, "Sorry about that. I'm tired. It's been a long night." I felt bad for shouting and doubting this man at this point. But after the second turning, if you don't go down it, it leads to a countryside and nothing for a few miles. So I was scared that he was heading that way. I told him don't worry about it, gave him my money, and then said keep the change, as I felt it for him being tired. He said thank you, smiled, and put his hand on my leg and said, "You know you're a very pretty girl." With that, I quickly smiled awkwardly and said good night. And I didn't manage to get 1 foot out the door when he grabbed my right arm, and I felt funny on my right side, which hurt. I managed to pull myself back up and tried to get out. Some of it is a blur, but I remember him pulling, and I could feel pain on my arms. I managed to get 1 foot out the door when he yanked me by my hair. I could feel pain on my back. I managed to wiggle free, and I left everything in the car. It was the case of run, Forrest, run, and I ran home as fast as I could. Luckily, it was just right around the corner. I remember running upstairs and ringing my boyfriend, which is now my husband, and then it just went black. I passed out. I woke up the next day in my own bed. My boyfriend stopped over and slept on the sofa that my mom and dad had made for him. He informed them what had happened. They let me sleep for a bit. When I did wake up, I had scratch marks and blood all over my arms and back from the taxi driver. I didn't realize at the time, but the asshole bit me too, on my arm. I ran upstairs and blacked out from shock. I called all the taxi services and even the police the next day. I gave the company name and nobody heard of it. I gave the description of what he looked like. I then thought, has anyone else in our hometown had this bad experience? So I went on Facebook and asked around. To my shock, lots of girls that I actually knew said that they had an encounter with him. One said he was acting shady and showing off, so she didn't go in. Another got out when he complained about her sitting in the back seat and not the front. The police said he must have got scared and backed out of the plan, or saw that I was about to use my phone when he went past the second turning, but got the courage to do it again. My boyfriend went back to the area where I ran from, and all my stuff was laid out on the path. Obviously, he didn't want evidence in his car. Police were keeping a lookout for him, but nothing ever came of it, until a few years later when he was caught. Me and my husband were watching the news, and he had gotten arrested. One woman rang the police, and they got him on so many attacks and attempts. I do wish that I managed to get a good swinging punch on his face, but glad that he was caught, and hope that he has learned his lesson. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.